This is Make It Mentionable. I'm Alyssa Patmos, and this is the show about being human in a world that encourages us to be robots. I invite you to join me as we journey through the mess, the magic, and the mania in between, because what we can talk about, we can manage. This honest conversation extravaganza includes free-flowing conversations and high doses of vulnerability to remind you that you aren't alone. No topic is off limits, and episodes are designed to leave you smarter, aka more self-aware than when you came. I am so glad you're here. Hello, and welcome back to Make It Mentionable. I'm your host, Alyssa, and today I am here with a former client of mine and a friend, Hannah Fryer, and we are talking about self-development tools, and one in particular that Hannah loves and is an expert at is the Enneagram. So Hannah, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's truly my pleasure. I'm really excited. I mean, like I said, I could talk about Enneagram all day, every day. So I'm happy to be here with you today.
Let's start with what do you do? What lights you up? Tell people watching or listening a little bit about who you are.
So, just a little bit about me. One thing is I am a certified Enneagram coach, and it is work I absolutely adore. It lights me up. It makes me happy. It never, ever gets old because, all humans are different. All humans are unique. And even though we kind of fit within one of the 9 numbers, it's a spectrum, and we get to exist as we are and, learn ways in which we can integrate and really grow, and learn ways in which we can kind of avoid what, might be as my therapist would call it, the irrational path of our anxiety or our fear or any of the things that get into us. I also do strategy and culture consulting for small businesses and nonprofits. I'm also really, really passionate about helping those groups get on track and make sure that they're, building their best business, building their, best nonprofit, and that they're making a difference in the world. Because really, at the end of the day, that's what's really important to me. And as an 8, as a challenger, justice is one of my, my core values and the things that matters most to me. And so I believe that nonprofits and small businesses are the ones in the world seeking justice and making a big impact. And I think the Enneagram is a great tool to help everyone who wants to do that.
I think we should also share, just as a fun fact, your obsession with car seats.
Oh, yes. We can absolutely talk about that. Yes. Sometimes I forget that that's the fun fact that is not common knowledge, is that I am like insanely obsessed with car seat safety. And, part of that is my obsessive compulsive disorder and anxiety. But then the other part is like, I just love making sure kids are safe. And car seats are one of those things that it's really easy to get it wrong. And it's really easy to get it wrong and not know you've got it wrong. And so I'm actually a certified child passenger safety technician. And so anybody who I offer free car seat checks because I want to make sure kiddos are safe in the car. Because I know, we just moved, but I had quite a commute before, about 45 minutes to take my kids to school. And that's a long time to be in the car. And that's a lot of opportunities for things to go awry. And my kids were actually, because I've had the best year in terms of cars. They were in an accident with me this year. And thankfully it was, only cosmetic damage, but like, it was a huge relief to me to know my kids were safe. And, I'll never, ever forget it because like really the only question my children had was like, Mom, are we still going to camp? And I'm like, oh, you're going to camp. Like you're the reason I had this car accident, but I know they were safe and they were perfectly fine. Like no one was harmed. And, a lot of that is because I put a lot of time, effort, and research into car seats. And so if you ever, you feel free to hit me up about car seats anytime, anywhere. You can check my link in bio. I will always help and make suggestions. And, one thing I do want to emphasize too, because now I'm just going to get crazy, is that like, although my kids ride in some more of the expensive car seats, there's no such thing as like a cheap car seat that isn't safe. They all meet the same, standards as long as they're installed correctly. And sometimes some of the least expensive car seats are some of the easiest to install. And so, never feel like you can't, make sure that your child rides safely because it's super easy to do. And it's usually very affordable. And there's all sorts of options if you ever need help with that.
Talk about things that I feel like people don't mention in routine conversations. I feel like that's one of them. I'm sure like in parent circles, but at the same time, it's something like you think you know what you're doing, or you're in a hurry. So I love that you do that. I always think that's a fun fact about you.
It is. And I kind of forget about it because it's so natural to me to do it every day. Like, put the kids in, and people will tease because I have 95th percentile, 97th percentile kids. And, I'm really, like I said, really passionate about car seat safety. So my kids were rear facing until they were 4 years old. And even my own mother was like, their legs are going like to literally just stay that way forever, permanently crossed. But like at the same time, they don't notice, kids fall asleep in weird places all the time and in weird positions. So it didn't bother them a bit. And, it kept them safe. So it's just little known things that, that I just get real excited about and go down a rabbit hole real easy.
So are research rabbit holes part of being an 8? And then we're going to backtrack and I'm going to ask you what the Enneagram is for people who might not know yet, but I'm just curious off the bat, like, go ahead.
No, you're fine. Research rabbit holes can be something that an 8 is really interested in. We have a direct line to the 5, which is the investigator. And so they are people who are going to take a deep dive. And like when I am anxious or I'm not feeling well, or when I'm not really like my best self, I kind of move to that 5 part of myself. I'll withdraw and I will start to just research because I'm going to find the way out of this problem, whatever it is. And so that can definitely have to do with my number. 5s are known for their research, but 8s have a direct line to 5. And so, when I'm not doing my best, I kind of take on the paranoid, crazy qualities of a 5. And I say crazy in love because big mental health advocate. But yes, that little bit of extra insistence on getting all the information comes from that 5s.
So for people who aren't familiar with the Enneagram, give us a high level overview of what is it, how's it used, who was it created by, or some of the history around it.
So, Enneagram has actually been around for thousands of years. It's an ancient tool that has kind of grown and developed. And, in the way that I believe in and use it in practice, it's very much integrative into, who you are as a person. And it's not definitive of who you are. It's not, it is just a guide, and it's a tool to learn to grow. And what it does is Ennea means, means 5. Here I am in my brain. Ennea, it means 9, and gram is chart. And so that's literally the 9 personality types that are on the Enneagram chart. And you can see sometimes, literally people have been very odd about thinking it looks like a satanic symbol because it does have like some crazy stars, but really what those are lines and directions and showing you the pathways in which you kind of have options in terms of growth. And so we all have a little bit of every number in us, but then we typically have, one main number. And that really speaks to the core of who we are. And it talks a lot about, it tells us a whole lot about our motivation and why we do things and how we see the world, not necessarily how the world sees us. So you and I may have the exact same response to, to stimulus, to some sort of situation where we want to react, but we will respond to it based on how we see the world. And even though it may be the same, the reason we've responded is for a completely separate and different reason. And I think that's really interesting because, even when I was very first learning about it, one of the biggest pieces of advice I will give anybody who ever wants to get into the Enneagram is do not type people around you. You think you can, you can't. And it's really because it's about who they are internally and the deepest, darkest wells of our soul. And so I mistyped my own husband. We've been married a decade, and I would have sworn to you from here to kingdom come, he was a 6 and he is a 1. And, when we read one of the books and he was going through these, because of course I have to use him as my guinea pig, he was like, no, that really doesn't resonate with me. And he started reading through the rest of the book, and, a 1 made complete sense. And it changed the way that I was able to look, not only as him as my partner, but as how I could respond and support him. And so that was really cool. And it's, like I said, it's intended to be a tool. It has been around for hundreds of years. It's become a lot more popular here, more recently, but it is, it's something that has been developed over a long period of time. And it can be used spiritually. It can be used, agnostically. It's not necessarily, it doesn't have to go one way or the other. You can take it for what for what works for you, and use those tools to grow, who you are as a person. And at the end of the day, that's what I really feel like it is a tool for growth.
I love that because, so, I mean, as you know, I'm certified in DISC and driving forces. And so similarly, what I love about both the Enneagram and DISC is sort of the fluidity, because, we're so obsessed with people as a culture, like we're so obsessed with personality tests and finding out more about ourselves. But some of them, I feel like they end up putting us into boxes, and it becomes this excuse to be like, oh, well, I'm this, and so I'm this way. And so what I love about DISC and the Enneagram is that it's more, here's a construct of behaviors. Like we all have all of them, but here's the one that's the primary showing up for you. And there's fluidity, like the connection to the other lines. Like what happens when we're not our best self, and what happens when we are our best selves. So from that perspective, can you talk a little bit about what's the difference between the numbers, or give us an overview of sort of what's happening? What are some of the things that distinguish one from the other?
Okay, so each different type has kind of what I like to call our core longing, our core desire, our core fear. And, and then there's also, childhood wounds. And those are kind of the ways that we learn to differentiate what messages we either heard or perceived when we were children. And so my fun joke is, that I'm an 8, and there's a lot of jokes that like, you really can't be an 8 without experiencing a little trauma. Like it's just required. But like, you can read some books and realize like, this is just how we're hardwired. And, how we respond to things based on, what we saw, what we perceived, when we were younger. And these were the messages we received. And so each number received a different message. And, for my example, I'm an 8, and the childhood wound, that childhood message that I received, whether it was told to me directly or perceived, was that you cannot trust anyone, that you're going to be betrayed. And so you've got to take care of yourself. And, and I know throughout my life, there are people who are absolutely got my back, and I don't, but at the same time, I have to train myself to believe it. And, and I have to watch my own behavior to recognize whether or not I will safeguard, or, one of the things that, you and I have talked about before, in terms of me being your client, is fake vulnerability. So a brilliant master of fake vulnerability. And I didn't even realize it because I was too afraid, to be truly vulnerable with someone until I knew they were going to be comfortable being vulnerable with me first. And that's not fair to the person that you're trying to have a relationship or a friendship or any kind of, communication with. Really, it's very unfair to ask them to trick them into being vulnerable with you just so that you can feel comfortable around them. And, so it's interesting to see, the different options of the different types and how it affects us all differently. Because again, we're a spectrum. So, I can sit next to another 8 and we will have, some really strong common themes. I have a great friend who's an 8 that lives here in the same community as me. And so we'll get together and we will like, okay, who's hurt you? We will burn them to the ground. Like where are they? And like, I love the example. One of them, another friend that I have is Ted Lasso. I love Ted Lasso. Like I could watch that show until.
Okay, wait, I have to interrupt. I don't want you to forget what you're going to say, but Jeff and I have this argument in our house around if we like Roy or not. And I love Roy. And Jeff is not Team Roy. He does not like him. So I need to know, what do you think of Roy?
Roy's an 8. And so I love Roy. And I was having a conversation with, I love Roy. Like I love him.
Me too.
And I love his character development. Well, and you watch, because, if you'll watch, I mean, not to get any spoilers, but you will watch his character development and progression as he starts to really develop past that, bitter, angry, I will fight a small child just because you looked at me funny kind of, attitude, to eventually getting to a place where like, oh, I can process my emotions and I can have a conversation with someone without wanting to headbutt them or punch them in the face. And it is, I can totally see parallels in my own life about what that looks like, about how I had to kind of grow up a bit, because I was absolutely, for all of the, Southern life that I've lived, where I was taught to paint the barn and, put on a little lipstick and make sure you smile more, I was also the first one ready to absolutely kick someone's ass if they messed with the underdog, or they messed with somebody who, couldn't defend themselves. And, that's a really common characteristic of eights, is like, we can be a total dick when we want to be, but we will literally lay down our lives for the people who make it into our circle. And, if you watch the relationship with him and Keely develop, you really start to see like, he's willing to come back and have the conversation. And that's been something I've had to learn. It happened to me just the other night about, having to come back to my husband and say, you know what, like, I totally overreacted to that. I'm really sorry if I said something that hurt your feelings. This is where I was coming from, and it wasn't right the way that I responded to you. And of course he's accustomed to me, so he just laughs, because like, he knows I'm just going to like get raving, crazy, angry. And like, because that's my first response. Yeah. That's my core emotion, is anger. I'm happy, I'm angry, I'm sad, I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm angry, I'm hungry, I'm angry. Yeah. I've got to sort it out. Like, what's actually underneath there?
Yes, which can be hard to do. Jeff and I had something that came up last night too, and I had to do the same thing. Like, I had an overreaction, and and I'm emotional. Like, I talk with a lot of intonation in my voice. He's like cool as a cucumber all the time, like not a monotone, but he's just so chill. And yeah. I experience my emotions. And so we had something come up, and I raised my voice when I wanted to feel heard, and that does not sit well in his body at all. So I had to go apologize as well.
I understand that completely.
So circling back to why you brought up Ted Lasso, something about your friend, and I think you were saying that like two of you can be similar.
Yeah, we can absolutely be similar and be the same number even, and respond differently, depending on our own personal growth and development. And so I loved, like, I have a good friend who, I have a good friend who lives in this community that is also an 8. And so she and I love to get together, but like, okay, who are we taking down? Like, who's doing something wrong in the community? And, most of the time it is just a session to be like, I have to get this out somewhere. Right. But, some of us, like 8s, are really open about their anger, but we are in the anger triad with 2 numbers who don't like to be open about their anger. And so actually my husband is a 1, and he's in the anger triad too, but his shows up as resentment. And literally, if you were to ask him, and I have, like, and our in therapy, we've talked about the fact that, being angry to him is wrong. Like, it's bad. But resentment doesn't feel bad to him. And of course, like, we're both like, you have to get to anger before resentment, but okay, like, whatever, you got to tell yourself to feel better. And then every now and again, like, he'll just, he doesn't even explode. He just implodes. And so he has a really hard time processing, that particular emotion, because he thinks it's bad. Whereas we have 9s who are on the other end of our anger triad, and they would like to pretend everything is peaceful and quiet and calm and cool as a cucumber until they can't anymore. And then they explode externally. And that's okay. Like, but we, it's part of the process of learning, whether or not, how to process that emotion, and recognizing, like, to me, it's absolute second nature to be Roy Kent. Like, I will absolutely, are we allowed to cuss on here?
Yeah, okay? You can cuss.
Okay. I will, because as an 8, I will absolutely be like, fuck you and the horse you rode in on. And like, I'm going to come for you and your family, all because you hurt, like, someone's, like, you like looked at my child funny. Like, I will get you. Like, or if you mess with my husband, like, I'm coming for you for the jugular. And at the same time, like, it's not always necessary. Sometimes that's a bit much in terms of show of force. And like, if you've seen some of I'm hoping I'm not spoiler alerting anything about Ted Lasso, but like, you can see, like, where he's like, who's Bernard? Like, right. Where am I going to go get him? Like, where does he live? Because we are going to go make him pay for hurting your feelings. And so that's my natural response. Whereas like, I'm friends with, another couple, and their big joke is that she's Ted Lasso and he's Coach Beard. And so like every now and again, like, they work really well together as a team, but they do it in very different ways. And so, she is the very enthusiastic and warm and, exciting person. And he is more of a, like, we'll just sit back and see it. And like, you can see it even in like pictures of them on Instagram. They're totally adorable. So they are totally Ted and Coach Beard. And then I'm Roy Kent. And so I even bought a shirt that says more of a Roy than Ted.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, okay. So I had never actually heard that each number has a different childhood wound. And that's super interesting, especially given the work that I do. So
yes, absolutely.
So I need to know more about this. So, what are some of the other childhood wounds? Like, so I pulled mine up because we might as well just dissect me on the show.
Gently,
why not?
And kindly, because it's a beautiful tool. And as Dr. Sharon would say, the truth will set you free, but first it's going to really piss you off.
Yes.
So
Sharon's character this season was so amazing. I'm obsessed.
Yeah. But I love it. Yeah. The truth will set you free, but first it's going to piss you off. And that is absolutely true of the Enneagram. If you do not feel like you've been punched in the face, it's not your number.
So first, we can give sort of the high level of the names. So type 1 is the reformer, 2 is the helper, 3 is achiever, 4 is individualist, 5 is investigator, 6 is loyalist, 7 is the enthusiast, 8 is challenger, and 9 is peacemaker. So in my report, which I took before we talked, I have 4 that are sort of high. So for me, the enthusiast and the helper are both the highest, and they're 21. But the peacemaker and investigator come in tied at 18 underneath those. And so I've heard a few different things, and I'm curious about your opinion on this. I've heard that for women who show up with a 2 high, it can be part of the cultural conditioning. And so dissecting back, like if we're actually a 2 or if we've just been conditioned to be that good girl, can be semi-difficult. So I think I ruled out that I'm not naturally a 2. Like I am a helper, but I think there's a lot of things in the 2 that feels like good girl conditioning to me.
For sure.
And I think I also ruled out the 5 doesn't totally resonate. Like it's a version of me similar to you where it's like, okay, research rabbit holes, the precision and like the discovery there. But I think then I'm debating between 7 and 9. And I know this is something that comes up routinely for people. Like they'll have a few top scores and you kind of have to read through it. And it's open to you seeing which one resonates, which I love. I love tools that allow us to critically think and apply it for ourselves instead of just being this like, here, throw it at you. And now it's my Bible of personal development, Okay. So with that, I'm very curious, what are the childhood wounds of the 7 and the 9?
Okay. So big issues with 7 is that like you are not going to be abandoned. And but it comes really from the message that you heard as a kid is that like your nurturing was taken away too early. And so like there was, whether that was, again, it doesn't always mean that like, we don't need to go back to our, our biological parents and scream at them. Cause like, sometimes we're just not equipped to handle, I'm an 8. I can promise you, like, I'm just going to go ahead and set up extra money for therapy for my children because like, I know we're all going to screw up, to some extent, but it's, but the message that they really heard is that, that they're not going to be taken care of. Their needs are not going to be met. And, they spend a lot of time running from pain and discomfort by there are FOMO people. So there are like, my brother-in-law, I believe is a 7. I need to verify that. And I'm an 8. And so one of the things to kind of know about wings is that like, we can kind of take on the characteristics of the numbers next to us when we're with other people, or we may have a more dominant part of us that comes out. I have a really dominant 9 wing when I'm teaching and facilitating. And then I have a really dominant 7 wing when I'm with 7s. Cause I'm like, I am all in, we're doing all the fun and crazy things. And then.
So can you explain what a wing is really quick?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So the wing is the number on each side of your primary Enneagram type. And so so as with, for me, a wing would be a 7 or a 9. For, you, if you were a 7, then you could have a 6 wing and an 8 wing. For a 9, they would have a 1 wing and an 8 wing. And so you kind of depends on, how that shows up. And some people are very static in their number. So they don't really take on heavy characteristics of their wings, but more often than not, there's a little bit of prevalence from one side to the other. And sometimes, again, it's circumstantial. As you grow, you learn to integrate, more of the good parts of each of those numbers that are on each side of you. And so, like I said, I use my 9 wing a lot. And, mediating is something that comes really naturally to me because of that 9 wing. I can see a lot of perspectives. I'm able to kind of sort through things objectively without, some people would say we don't have feelings as 8s. We do. We just cover them up with lots and lots and lots of armor.
So, down. Emotional suppression.
That's right. If we don't acknowledge it and we cover it up, it's not there. And 9s, they have a different wound, and in the sense that, like, the message that they heard or perceived is that that their presence didn't matter, and that their opinion is not important. And 9s are so beautiful and yet so difficult to type sometimes, because they are really so concerned with blending and creating harmony that sometimes they just take on the characteristics of whoever they're next to. They're the kind of people you'll have a conversation with. You will leave thinking that, like, they are totally on whatever side it is you're on, or totally believe what it is you believe. And, like, they may think that you're absurd and that opinion is stupid, but they'll never, ever say it out loud. And they'll always engage with you as though you're the most important person that that they're around. They're super, they're peaceful, they're chill, but under that surface is that volcano of anger that they struggle to, to wake up to and to acknowledge. And usually it's, and it's oftentimes that you'll notice that they move along, and, like, maybe they only erupt every 6 months. And so, everybody around them is like, oh my God, what just happened? Because they are totally level and even keel, but it's because they believe that their presence isn't important and that their opinions don't matter, and so that they go along to get along. And so it's really important that that they learn that I actually do care where you want to eat. Like, I do actually care, like, how you feel about this particular issue.
Okay, so this semi helped me, but I can see aspects of the wound in each of them too. So if someone, and so one of the things about the Enneagram is it's long. There's a lot of information in there, which I love, because you can, even when you get your own report, you can learn about what other types exist in the world, and then adapt your style in the presence of others so that it makes it easier for that person to listen. Like, communication has to be the exchange of meaning. Otherwise we're just talking at people. And so when we can understand more of these dynamics, it allows us to communicate more effectively, because we can try on different ways of sharing meaning. So with that, you get a lot of information in here, and it can be semi-hard to sort of navigate it and figure it out if you're not working with someone like you who helps you break it down. So what are some of the other questions that we could consider? And in this case, I'll use it to consider deciphering my own, but what are some of those other questions that we could use to decipher which one of these I am?
So a lot of the good questions to ask revolve around motivation. And so, like, why are we choosing to do this? And so, is a good question you might ask someone who is trying to decide between a 7 and a 9 is, like, do you never have an opinion about where you should eat? Or do you want to go to the restaurant that's brand new? Which one is it?
Oh, it's both. This is where I struggle, because so historically, Jeff's like, Alyssa, where do you want to go to dinner? And I'm like, oh, I don't really care. Like, I'm the more fluid one, and other people, generally speaking, I feel like are more particular than me, which may or may not be true. I might actually just be hiding it underneath, thinking that my opinions don't matter. Maybe. I don't know.
It's possible. It could be there.
But then I had awakening. Part of my healing journey in the past year has really been an awakening to my needs and wants. And I suppressed them for a very long time. It was very hard for me to communicate what I needed and what I want. I was scared of not getting that met. And so I I would let someone else pick, and then I'd be okay with it. But I love going to the new restaurants. Like, I am an explorer. I'm an adventurer. I'm like, give me all the novelty. I mean, I've moved cities every 5 years, it feels like, and just like on a whim, spur of the moment. So what does that tell you?
Well, it tells me that we still have some work to do in figuring out what your number is. And also, something to know too is 9s and 6s are actually one of the most difficult to type, because they are, 6s, 6s have an inner committee. And so, usually that's what determines, because they've got a whole group of people in their head going like, are you sure that was the right choice? Like, should we want to do that? Are you an idiot? I think you're kind of an idiot. Wait a second. Are you actually an idiot? Or are you like, should we get tested? Are we sure that we're not an idiot? And they're also scanning the horizon constantly, for threats. And so they're the person who literally can't sit. Like, if you were to go to the newest restaurant, they're going to want a table where they have a view of almost the entire room, and they want the entrance and the exit. They need to know where everybody is. And they, in their head, have planned an evacuation situation. So in case something horrible happens, that they can get all the people that matter to them out of the restaurant safely, because they know where the exits are. They know where the entrances are. They know where the bathrooms are. They know all the places to hide, just in case. And like, they've already figured out whether or not the table is bolted down so that they can use that as a shield. Like, and that all happens instantaneously in their brain. Like, they're walking into a restaurant. And
I understand that. If we plan seating arrangements at dinners based on someone's Enneagram type, I feel like that would be highly effective for the conversation, because it so matters. If you go in, so I have found, I don't know if you have found this, I'm going on a slight tangent. We're going to come back. But
I'm always real happy to go. But
I don't know if this happens to you, but if I go to a dinner and there are like two men, if it's two men on one side and like me, let's say there's like a dinner of 6, forget what's happening on the other side for a second. I feel like men have a tendency to always lean forward when they're talking. And so if two men are sitting next to each other and I want to be involved in that conversation, I'm like, I have to sit in the middle. I need to sit in the middle, because my tendency will be to sit back, and like, I can watch you two interact. You both can lean forward, do your natural thing. I can lean back. I feel like there are subtleties in our Enneagram numbers that influence these sorts of things too. Like,
oh, for sure.
I like to have my back like up against something, or like not completely exposed. And so we usually choose a spot in the restaurant, like based on that, for me, because I'm weird.
No, you're you.
Yeah. Yes, I am me. And that is a particular thing about me. Yeah. But I don't know why exactly that came up, but it makes me laugh that a 6 like has this very valid need based on who they are to want to be in that vantage point. And I think the more that people are aware of that and can understand it and then articulate it to us. If I had a friend that was like, hey, I feel more comfortable if I can have an exit route, I'm like, great. Where do you want to sit? I don't care as much. Like,
yeah,
guide the way. Let me know.
Yes. Yeah, for sure. And it really does, that also comes back to the point you made too, about like how women especially can carry a lot of characteristics of 2s, because we're trained that way. It definitely can be that way. And it really could, I think that's also could be an indicator of your type. A 9 would be one who would sit back and listen. And whereas an 8 is like, excuse me, I'll be sitting in the middle because I can't understand what you're saying. And I would like to be part of this conversation. And oops, I'm in charge again. Like, oops, now I've taken over and we're talking about what I want to talk about. Like, like it's, it really, I mean, that, like I said, that could be very indicative of, you potentially being a 9. And like I said, you can still want that adventurous spirit. And you can, like I said, we have all these pieces of, of numbers. And when when you're with, if you're a 9, if you're with a 1, then like, you're probably like a little bit like my husband is a 1, and they're easy to type because they have one inner critic. So like your inner committee with the 6, the inner critic lives with the 1, and they're constantly berating them and telling them that they're wrong and they're bad and that they're not good. And I realize, like, why am I yelling at my husband? He's doing it all on his own. Like, I don't have, mostly I need to be like, actually, you're doing a really good job. And, but, the downside of that is that he's always helping me remember things, do things, and one of the funniest parts, of our marriage that I've always found is like, with eights, like we don't necessarily have to be in control. We tend to take control because if we are in control, nothing bad can happen to us. And we can protect our safe people. So it really is a lot less about being in control, but we do not want to be controlled. Whereas like a one has a right way to do things. And like, of course, my husband, who's our, money guy, who only, he's like thinking way long-term about like the meals we'll be having when we're 80 and not the meal that I want for lunch today. And so, he's put together like a leftover thing, which I hate leftovers. Like I've always hated leftovers. There's the whole thing.
They're terrible. Planned overs are okay. Leftovers are crap.
Yes, agreed. 100%. I'm here. I will die on that hill. Like that is a hill I will die on. And like, I don't like them. I don't like, I don't like leftovers. I've never liked leftovers. There's like three things. And again, planned, like if I'm like, I'm going to make my cause like I have a great macaroni and cheese recipe that like, I know I'm going to want to eat that again. Like it's going to be good and I'm going to like it. And it's only going to get a little bit crispier.
Right. Planned over. Or if you like brown hamburger meat and you make tacos one night, but you're going to make pasta sauce the next night.
Yes. So, and then you're like spaghetti. Yeah. Or like whatever it is that you want to make. So but yes, all fine. Yes, but no, not leftovers. But my husband is thinking like we eat leftovers now. So we eat at the 5-star restaurant when we're 80. And I'm like, okay, how about we find a nice like middle ground, but he will put like, to him, it's the right thing to do is to save money now. And so I will go to get in my car because he leaves before I do usually. And he'll have put like a bowl of whatever we had for dinner last night on the and I will become irate because like, to me, I'm like, you're controlling me. Like you're trying to tell me what I have to eat. Like, fuck you, fuck this. You can't tell me what I'm supposed to eat. You can't tell me where I'm just I'm having this whole conversation in my head about like what an asshole he's being by trying to make me eat this food. And he's like, just trying to like do something. Like it never even occurred to him that I would think of that as control. He sees it as like, well, if you want it, I thought you might want it. You seemed to like it last night. Like that's all that's happening in his brain. But of course my 8 brain is like, are you trying to control me? Are you trying to tell me where I have to eat? Like what's going on?
Well, and this is why like our world is rife with rife. I don't know which word I'm trying to say. Miscommunication.
Oh, 100%.
Because we all have different models of the world. Like my model of the world is completely different than Jeff's model of the world based on past relationships I've been in, like how I grew up, like past experiences, where I've been, what I've experienced. And similarly, that's happening in any conversational dynamic. So we can say the exact same thing and then two people are going to respond to it differently. And so I think any doses of clarity we can get about alternative models of the world, that's how we become wise in communication. That's how we can become the most powerful communicators in the room, is when you're open to these other models. Like the person who's the most behaviorally flexible is going to be the best in the conversation because they're willing to adapt and mold. Are ones very obsessed with efficiency?
Extremely efficient. Efficiency is one of the most important things. Like they do not understand someone being inefficient. It's a waste of resources. It's not doing things the right way, and to talk about, ones have a really, really hard time sometimes with the Enneagram because they do believe they are right. That is the only right. Mm-hmm. And what the Enneagram teaches us is there are 9 very valid perspectives on the world, and that we can see the same, just like, artwork or anything else, like, we can look at the same painting and have completely different responses to it. The completely different responses to stimuli. And so that's actually really hard. Ones can be very rigid in accepting that, like, no, it's okay to see things through a different perspective. But, their childhood wound is, that you are bad and that there's something wrong with you. And you are, so while they're ever present when they're really not healthy, they're picking on the people around them, gently helping them to be right and be better, and when they're, and even when they're healthy, they have to constantly fight that inner critic to say like, no, I am a good person. No, I do I do good things. I am contributing to my community, or I am a good dad, or I am a good, mom or sister, or, just human in general. And that's, that can be challenging for them, but they are very, very obsessed with efficiency. And to the point where sometimes it can get a little, as someone who's married to one, you're like, not everything has to be efficient. Like,
okay. I am so with you. I know I'm not supposed to type people, so I will have Jeff take this to confirm.
yes.
But his obsession with efficiency is comical. Like even walking downtown, we live in downtown Denver. We walk everywhere. It's like he'll pull out his phone to like see the most efficient route to walk there. I'm like, we know all the streets. Like let's mosey this way, or like. And there's I read a quote recently about the balance between like efficiency and beauty, because a lot of times they're at odd. And I'm like artistic and creative, and I believe everybody's creative, but creativity in terms of like art and poetry and like, I don't know, I want to do things in a harmonious, like fun way. And that is not always the most efficient. No. But it's efficient for meeting my need of wanting to be very creative.
Absolutely.
So it can be frustrating because I do not value efficiency at the same level as Jeff. I love and appreciate that he is so efficient, because if I need something done and we need to know the most efficient route, like you ask Jeff.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Like, that's your husband too.
Yeah. And he's going to drive everywhere we're going. Like whether it's walking, whether it's, and half the time I'm like, could we please walk like just a half a pace slower? Like I have long legs, I'm doing my best, but for the love of all that is holy, like I'd like to see my surroundings. Like we don't have to sprint there.
Yes. And this is where, especially in relationships like that, it becomes important to be super in tune with our needs and to be able to ask for them, because it's not that they don't want to meet them, but I think this is the box that they get put in, where it seems like they're super controlling, or they're super like they have to have things that way. I don't always think that they're unwilling to change, though, at least in my perspective. Like he wants me to get my needs met. I just have to be able to articulate it. And then when that's baked into the equation, oh, hey, this is important to me. Can we walk a little bit slower? Then it becomes efficient. Like it's like that transition, and it's efficient because it's like, hey, she's happy. I'm happy. We're still walking the most effective route, but these heels are killing her feet right now.
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And like they're not just compassionate. They can really appear that way. So can 8s, because we absolutely will, like, if you come to us with your, like, I have to find a kind way of saying this because I'm Roy Kent, but like, if you come to me with your bullshit sadness, like, I don't care, because like, and it's not that I don't care, because once I get to know you, you are like, I will care about everything. And again, if anybody hurts you, I mean, like, it's the miscongeniality speech. If anybody wants to hurt my new friends, like, I will come for you. Like, it is. But until then, like, don't talk to me about, your bullshit, not real problem. When, like, I was listening to a podcast right before this about, the difference in media coverage, in, the Gabby Petito, I don't know how to say her last name correctly. And I'm a bit, but like the difference in media coverage and her being missing versus, missing and murdered Indigenous women and women of color. And like that women of color are 10 to 12% more likely to die by murder. And that Indigenous women, and that's the number one cause of death, is murder. Like, and, so don't talk to me about like how sad you are that they didn't have the brownie you wanted if we have these problems. Now, I'm able to put those things aside eventually, but if I'm in my justice mode, it's really challenging for me. And I can be really rigid about that. And same, like I said, with ones, when they're in efficiency mode and you are kind of deemed an inefficient member of the team, like sometimes you get cut. And sometimes I'm okay with that. And sometimes I'm not, because I'm like, I'm sorry, could you not have waited like 5 minutes before, you decided to cut me from the team while I gave it over for, gave it a little thought for a second? Or even when I express my needs, sometimes it just doesn't fit into the plan. And, like we'll wake up on the weekends and like, I already know the answer. Like, cause he's like, what's your plan for the weekend? I'm like, it doesn't really matter, because I know you have a plan. So if you'll just tell me what your plan is, then I'll tell you if it's going to work for me and we can negotiate around there, because like, I already know you've made the plan. So like, why are you asking me what my plan is when we already know it's cemented in your brain? And because I'm the more flexible of the two of us, like I'm comfortable adapting and moving around. And so it's easier for me to be like, okay, if those are the things you want to get accomplished, like I'm good with that, but here's the things I want to get accomplished. And I need you to fit those in, in your figure out your puzzle. I don't care how it gets done, just get it done.
I mean, negotiation is such a huge thing. Huge thing. And it's hard if only one person's willing to do it. But I feel like there's so much insight in the Enneagram about how to negotiate better and how to get people's needs met. Because one of my favorite definitions of conflict is that conflict is just an unmet need poorly expressed. And so when we can then recognize, okay, if we're in conflict, there's an unmet need here. What is the unmet need? A lot of times it's safety. For one, it sounds like, hey, I'm having this shamer go off in my head. I'm having this judger go off and telling me I'm terrible. And like, I need to understand that I'm a good person right now. And now we can't, ultimately, I think that's someone's own responsibility to heal that piece, which I love the Enneagram for too. Like it shows you your growth points. It shows you, where can I start to raise up? What are things that I can improve on or heal? But when we can have compassion for that underlying need, then the conflict becomes a way to get closer and to have more intimacy rather than this thing where it's like you against me and we're just battling it out and everybody ends up hurt and it's painful and lasts for hours. No.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as you know, my patron saint, Brene Brown, I mean, as she says, conflict actually drives connection. It doesn't disconnect people. When we're able to be, when we're able to have conversations about our needs and and when we're able to be honest with ourselves, sometimes that's really hard. Again, I've had to learn the really hard way that like, I'm not actually angry, I'm frightened. Or, I'm not actually angry. I'm really like, I have my feelings hurt. But of course, I can't tell people that I have my feelings hurt because then they're going to see me as weak and they might use it against me. And I don't want to be vulnerable. I'm going to armor up. And, that's not a healthy way to go throughout the world because I miss the opportunities for connection and for really connecting, and communicating with people in a way that is really meaningful. Because if you wander around the world, again, thinking about it from your perspective, it's really, really difficult to make genuine, and authentic connections. And, the Enneagram is, again, a great communication tool from that perspective. It's just like, we really and I can tell you, even from someone who's not, again, you give me your poor, like the Statue of Liberty, give me your poor, you're tired, you're sick, you're hungry. I have compassion and empathy for days. But then you give me your like rich white lady problem. And I'm like, I do not care. And like, there's literally nothing I can do to make myself care. But I have learned through the Enneagram that like, I can respect that perspective. And I can understand that like, okay, so I think this is stupid. And of course I will Roy Kent it. I'll be like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my entire life. Like, I don't even know why you're talking. And at the same time, learn to say that in my head and listen with compassion and, try for empathy, because when I understand, when I understand the childhood wound that's sitting there behind that, it's much easier to have empathy for people because you're recognizing it's coming from a place of pain and it's coming from a place that we've all experienced. And, I know exactly what it feels like to live in shame or to live in guilt or to live in, to be motivated by my childhood wound. And, and I don't behave the best that I should, or I do, react poorly to things based on, those particular circumstances for me. And it's completely unfair for me to not then want to turn around and use that tool to help me be more empathetic and understanding for people I'm talking to. And, so I think it's incredible that way. And, I think it's incredible that way. And, sorting out too, again, what's at the base of it? Is it, that good girl conditioning? Are we actually twos, or are we just told that we have to be? And, I had the hardest time, and my mom is actually a two. So she really is a genuine, like honest to God two. And as an 8, I actually have a direct line to 2 when I'm really healthy and I'm doing my best and I'm, my needs are getting met. I'm a healthy 2. And, and the same for twos when they can integrate and bring in some of those more assertive qualities of eight, like they've got that direct line. But like today I had a phone conversation with my mom, and I'm not sure what my sister is. And again, I have ideas, but again, I don't believe in typing anybody. I think it's really unethical. But like she called because they're having to, hire someone to caretake for my grandparents, and she needs to put together all of the information. But of course, her concern is like, I need to be direct and assertive, but I also want to be kind. So she called my middle sister first. So like there's three of us, she's the middle one. And she's like, so she calls her first to find out like, is this too harsh? And then she calls me like, is this harsh enough? Like, am I being direct enough? And like, so that, now she's realized that like, okay, like I can go and use that now for my advantage and know that like, I'm not trying to be mean. I am just direct naturally. But I will tell you, like, no, don't bring that weak ass shit to me, because that's not gonna work. And no, this is a hard boundary, and that. And like, we need to put it in writing. It's important. And that's hard for some people to do, because like I said, eights, twos, I mean, they lots and lots of women are twos, but like truly, like my mom is a genuine two. And so like, I know every time I go to her house, there is going to be my favorite snack. And there's like, and it doesn't matter. Like I will literally be driving down the highway and decide like, I don't want to use a gas station bathroom. And so I'll be like, I'm only 10 miles from my mom's house, because she just lives right off of the highway. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to run over there. And like, I know whether she's home or not, like my favorite snack is going to be there. I'm probably going to have a present that was specially picked out just for me. And that's just, her personality. And it's all,
and their twos at their best then are adding this like delight. They're adding this magic thoughtfulness that some of the other types, it doesn't sound like they think in the same way. And
no,
so,
not at all. It's so beautiful.
Yeah. That's the beauty of it. Like, especially when you're creating a team, having different people with the different types on there. And that's where it's like learning to appreciate and see these things in other people changes the perception of how you can build culture too. It was interesting because a friend texted me recently, and when I first met him, he labeled me in his phone like thinks she's strong or something. It was like it was like, yeah, it was kind of a play on him thinking I had a facade of like pretending or thinking I was strong. And then it's been interesting because
now I want to hit them because you're my friend. And I'm like, where are they? I'm going to get them now. Continue. Sorry.
You're fine. So then he's had his own sort of unfolding journey though. He's had his own journey of being able to be more vulnerable and opening up. And like, me, I'm a very much an open book. Like I talk about crying all the time on Instagram. Like I think there's a lot of power in that. And so as he's had his own journey of opening up and experiencing more emotion, he sent me a text the other day and he's like, I have realized how strong you are. And you're one of the strongest people I know. But he didn't value it in himself a year ago. And so he couldn't see it. It was impossible for him to see it in me because he didn't value it in himself. And so the more we can appreciate these other types, I think it gives us so much more awareness to have a more colorful world of the people around us. And I love that.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, just the difference in, of course I have done the therapy journey. Like I believe in using all tools you can possibly can, but I can't, like I said, I can attest 100% that it has revolutionized the way that I look at people. And, I am 1,000 times more empathetic and considerate because now I see my mom's childhood wound of like, as a two, your needs don't matter. Mm-hmm. And, and so of course she's incredibly thoughtful and thinks about, the things that are going to matter the most to you or that it's going to really make a difference. I have another friend who, oh my gosh, I mean, I was just explaining that to my husband the other day about like, I do believe in love languages to an extent, like, mm-hmm. and one of my love languages is gifts, believe it or not. I know it's crazy. But like, it's not about, I was explaining to him, it's not about the money you spend. Like you have to spend lots of money because you don't get me gifts all year round. And so then when my birthday comes and you forget it, you have to buy me an expensive present because I need to know that it was a sacrifice. And of course my money managing husband is like, oh, it's painful. And so, but I'm like, but it's not, and he even talked about viewing that kind of as a weakness. It's wrong to him to think of needing gifts. And I said, it's not about the present. Like it's about the fact that like I said, my friend Lisa, who's a 2, we used to work in the same office building. And like, I would walk in and like, she'd leave a pen with like, so glad you're part of my tribe on, and like, I still have all of those things. I know that like, there's a few of these presents that I keep on my dresser that like my husband absolutely bought in the airport on his way home thinking, oh shit, I didn't get anything from my wife, but I don't care because at some point he said, oh shit, I didn't get anything from my wife. And so
the thought, there's so much in
got
thought.
A thing. Yeah. And so like, I mean, like one is a tiny little bowl. And I think he was actually in Denver when he got it because it's just a little pottery bowl, but it's in turquoise, which is my color. It's my jam. And so I love it. And it sits on my office shelf in like a place of honor to me because like that was a time he thought of me. And 2s are just exceptional at figuring that out, even when I don't, even if I don't know that that's something that was going to make me feel special, they know. But then it's also really important that they are learned to express their needs because it can be really easy to get resentful when you feel like I do, and I do, and I do, and I do, and no one ever remembers me. And, and it's, it's a lesson that we all kind of have to learn as, with my birthday situation this year with my delightful husband, who I adore and love, even though he messed up my birthday. It's like, I've had to have this conversation with my mom, like we're grown ass women. If we decide we want a birthday party, like, have I ever called one of my friends and been like, I want to go have some drinks to celebrate my birthday? Like, do I have any friends that would be like, no, that's weird that you're throwing your own like party? No. And they'd be shitty friends if they did, and they would not be invited anymore because like, it's ridiculous. Of course, like if somebody called me and was like, hey, it's my birthday coming up and I want to have like get together with my peeps to celebrate, and have a drink. I would absolutely show up and be there. And so, it's learning, to meet our own needs, but at the same time communicating, like sometimes I could use a little bit of affection and love and appreciation too. And
because if we 2s, I feel like you put so much out and it's effortless to you. And again, going back to the model of the world thing, like, so in their model of the world, it's effortless to think of people like that. So then in conflict, when like interpersonal conflict or relationship conflict comes up, it's like they want the other person to mind read a lot of times, like, correct me if I'm wrong, but
no, that's a huge thing for 2s. How could you not know? How could you not know?
How could you not do this for me? And then a person like a 1, if a 2's with a 1, then I'm assuming it's like all the judger, all the shame, I'm a bad person goes off, and they're like, wait, but I'm not a bad person, and I just don't think like this, and I have to, it has to be okay that I'm like this.
And so why do you need that? That's not right. Why do you need that? I don't understand it. I don't know why you need that.
Yeah. And so this lobbing over, and this lobbing over, this like tossing over of a need can be challenging. But when we look at where it comes from, it makes it easier to understand. I love it. It's so fascinating because it gives us the tools to understand, like, where are our growth points? Where's the shadow part as much as the strength part? So absolutely. Do you have any other questions to help me dissect if I'm a 7 or a 9?
Well, I just from hearing you talk a little bit, I'm hearing a lot of 9 tendencies. At the end of the day, only you can decide. So like, you're going to have to research it, but I'm hearing a lot of things of like, I like to, it doesn't really matter to me. I don't have like strong opinions about that, or like, and if you really think about that, is that actually true?
So the interesting part is I think the 9 has been a bunch of my conditioning. And so it's interesting because I took it 5 months ago and then reviewed it today. And 5 months ago, I looked at it slightly differently, but I've done a ton of work in the past 5 months healing wise. So when I looked at it today, it was interesting because I resonated a lot, even with the struggle of the 7 more so than I had in the past. And I started to think that maybe the pieces that were more muted, like that was the conditioning and how I learned to adapt things. But at its core, I think there is much more seven there. The question I have about sevens, because anytime someone talks about like extroversion, I am not the person who walks into the room and will like go to the middle of the party. Like I'm not really that like center of attention type person there. And I'm great with strangers. Like I am the most extroverted person on the planet with strangers. And with like close friends. And then the middle ground of acquaintance, I'm like, I don't know what to do. So does that fit into a seven?
Oh, absolutely. And, again, we're talking about a spectrum. So like not every seven is like the life of the party, but they are avoiding pain and discomfort and they're covering it with new experiences. And so, if that resonates a lot with you, it's like, okay, this has gotten hard and I don't like it. So we're going to move. Oh, this has gotten hard and I don't like it. So, like I can have this conversation or I can literally move away. Like I can deal with this pain and this discomfort, or I can go buy 15 things on Amazon to make me feel better. Or like I can put it out of my mind and decide to take a weekend trip, or like anything to distract from the pain and the discomfort. Because really at the end of the day, like I said, that nurturing was removed early for them. And so they don't believe that their needs are going to get met. And so rather than dealing with that and healing from, those wounds, they just run to the next exciting thing. And like, they are the people who sometimes like, and I love sevens. Like they are fun and they are, they bring so much joy to the world because they're just generally happy people because again, they don't want to be sad or unhappy. So they spend all of their time happy, but they, I love them so much because of what they bring, but I also, want to hug them and say like, it's okay. I know that like you're running from this conversation or you're ditching me because you found something better. And I get that. And I'm not going to have my feelings hurt because I know that it's not really because you don't love or care about me. It's because like you're feeling uncomfortable and that like that might be a little bit more distracting or exciting than having a conversation with me. And of course, especially as, a certified Enneagram coach and someone who just wants to dig. I just love digging into people's personality, especially after, really learning so much about the Enneagram. And so like, nobody wants to just sit with me and let me like, cause I'm like, let's figure this out. You want to talk about it? Let's get into that. Why do you think that's, what do you think is under there? What is going on? And so, so those are some good questions, to ask is like really, what is the motivation? Are we trying to avoid pain or are we refusing to acknowledge that we matter? And, that's the big difference is, because they can have a lot in common. And the other thing about nines is they can really fall asleep to their emotions. And that's something that I don't know that I hear from you is that you experience your emotions really strongly. And it's very easy for a nine to just check out. And, like how everybody, like I had, a day the other day where I just wasn't feeling life in general. And I totally tapped into my nine and I laid on the couch and I Netflixed and by myself. So I can't say Netflix and chilled. So I was alone, but I mean, I literally in the saddest sense, Netflixed and chilled on my couch because like, I just needed to numb for a minute because, I was working through some things and, and that's normal, but for a nine, they kind of live there in that numb space. And like I said, it's really only till, something finally breaks the camel's back that they will have an outburst or be angry. Whereas a seven is going to be more vocal about their emotions, or they're going to be, a little bit more, not necessarily spontaneous, but prompt in their response to stimuli. So it's not always that they are like, because people will look at them and, some people will call a seven a flake. And I think that's really crummy to say, but because again, like if they're not healthy or they're dealing with something really hard, like, and you've invited them to dinner and then they text you 5 minutes before they're going to be there, that like, I found a better thing. Goodbye. Like it's because they weren't ready to face you. They knew you knew them and they couldn't right then. And it's not about me. Like, that's the thing. I mean, like, and that is the other wonderful thing I think about the perspective is like learning that like what other people think of you is none of your damn business. Cause like, it's really not why anybody does anything. They're not thinking
No.
about you. Like they're thinking about what's happening internally.
Right. Like one of my favorite things I learned as I was going through NLP training is, you judge the behavior, not the person. Judging a person is futile because it comes from all of these other beautiful things, these painful things that have happened in their life. And so if you judge the person rather than just like, hey, this behavior was kind of crap and it influenced me in this way, like, are you willing to change it? That's a very different conversation than like, you suck. I can't believe you're flaky.
Yeah. And, and a previous version of me as an 8, we're full of freaking judgment. And we're like, and of course, loyalty is and authenticity is incredibly important to us. So like you ditch at dinner with me, fuck you. Like, how dare you? How dare you flake on me? I would never do that to you. Cause like, to me, once we're like, I mean, like literally when you're in, like, it's like the mafia, like you're in forever. And like, I will like totally show up and beat up a small child for making fun of you or whatever it is that needs to be done. I will pull a full Roy Kent and like get out the poster board and pay someone off. I mean, like whatever it takes, like in order to make it right and to protect, the people that are important to me, because, at the end of the day, again, my childhood wound is like, that no one is going to be there. You're going to be betrayed. And so my motivation then, in all of the work that I do is then to like, I'm going to protect people who can't protect themselves, because at the end of the day, I felt or perceived that no one protected me. And, it's real. And so when we look at like, Roy Kent, for example, if Jeff thinks he's an asshole, maybe we think about the fact that like, maybe like Roy didn't have anybody to protect him. And so he makes himself big. He makes himself strong. He wears lots of black. I just now noticed that fun parallel. So, there's lots there. And, and then there's, other numbers we haven't talked about too, that, they just have, they have the beauty and the heartache that goes with learning about who we are. And again, as Dr. Sharon would say, the truth, it is absolutely going to set you free, but it is going to, piss you off first. And so when we read your Enneagram, and like I said, and when you read it and you're like, oh my God, I am the world's worst, like, then that's a pretty normal response to finding out your number, unless you're a 4, because 4s just generally love their emotions, and they actually are really comfortable in melancholy. And they're not my favorite. I guess there is no such thing as my favorite number. I think that about every number. I'm like, I'm my favorite number. They're my favorite number. But they're also beautiful, and in the way that they're created. And 4s they're really big in getting into their emotions, and so like they are like will constantly be like, oh, I wish I was like you. Oh gosh, I wish I was an 8, or gosh, I wish I was a 6, or I wish I was a blah, blah, blah. And like, they're the only ones who in perpetuity act that way. The rest of us kind of settle in and we're like, okay, but 4s have that internal monologue that there's something flawed about you. You can't fix it. It's never going to be repaired. There's always going to be something wrong with you, and you're never going to fit in. Like 4s feel like they've been adopted. Like always, like, cause they just don't quite make sense with their family. They don't quite make sense with everyone around them. They can have some really, strong and assertive tendencies, but but they are not afraid to explore their emotions. They're not afraid to like really get in there, and they'll be the person who will absolutely swing from like full steel magnolias, like laughing and crying at the same time. And you're like, I don't know what to do with this, but they know exactly what to do with it, because they really value and live in their emotions. And 3s are another good example of like, if we were just building a team, and I'm telling you, like a zombie apocalypse team of every one of the numbers, like you'd have everything covered. I'd need an extra couple 6s probably, because like even on your teams, 6 is one of the most common numbers. Like they are badass, because like some see them as, the negative naysayers, but like I see them as the people who are literally looking for every possible like pitfall, and they're not bringing it up to be Debbie Downer, or Donnie Downer, or whoever, Pat Downer. I don't know. They're doing it because they want to protect you, and they are going to look for every possible hole and plug it. And so, when we can see that as a form of them trying to protect your team as opposed to them being a negative Nancy, then we can recognize like, oh, thank God you're here. And,
Right.
And we can change the way that we respond to people, and threes can be frustrating to some people, especially, fours can find threes really frustrating. Lots of people find threes very frustrating because they base, everything on achievement. And, their hidden message, their hidden wound is like, you're only as good as your last accomplishment. Your worth is based on what you can do and accomplish and not on who you are as a person. And so they're excellent. Again, like ones, you can hand them a project and know it is going to be done. It's going to be done beautifully. And but at the same time, the next question is like, okay, what's next?
Right.
Like they can't celebrate or value or appreciate that they are really accomplished human beings. And, because their value is not, is so tied up in, what is my next accomplishment? What's my next goal? I'm trying to think of the numbers we haven't covered.
I think we've touched on all of them, except for possibly we talked about 5 in relation to you and me at the beginning when we hadn't gone into as much. So the 5s are interesting.
They are.
I've had a lot of 5s in my life. So the investigator, what's the scope?
So one thing that people don't realize about investigators, and I think is, again, it's a hallmark characteristic to tell you for sure this is you, is they feel very much like they have a set amount of energy. So like they start each day with like, say I start every morning with 100% in my battery, they feel very much as though they already start off at 75%. So like they've got less energy than the rest of you. Anyway, and then they're very careful about where they use their energy. And when they withdraw, that they like, I know that like, I have two wonderful friends who are 5s, and like they literally, I know about them that like they're going to go do something extroverted. They've researched the crap out of it. They know their stuff. I mean, if you need to know something about a 5 and like, you're like, if you were ever just need someone to be your, like, go do the rabbit hole digging, like if, then you want to send a 5 because they're going to come back with every piece of information you could ever find. And they might visit the Library of Congress just in case, like they might've missed something important and, they're going to know all the things, but then they're going to need to take a nap for 3 days because they've used all of their energy. Right. And so, it's not even that they can't be extroverts. It's just that they only have so much to give. And so like but it's also very important for them to feel included and loved. And so like, I know one of like, and she and I have talked about this. One of my, dearest friends is a 5. And like, she's like, I want to be invited. I'm not coming, but I want to be invited. Yes. Or I'm going to come and participate for as long as I can. And then I'm going to have to go home. And that's okay. Like, I just had to know. Cause like, at first I was like, you're missing out. I want you to be part of this, and not realizing that like, they're done. They're out of energy, and they got to go into energy conservation mode, or they have to, to refuel. And, that looks like sleep. It looks like vegging out. It looks like, checking out and watching TV, whatever that person needs to do. They need to be able to replenish that battery and their energy, but they're, and their wound, their core childhood message is that their presence matters. Like it's learning that like, no, actually it's important that you're here and we want your input, because they're not going to be necessarily the first person to be, even though they're the expert probably on every subject ever, or they're definitely the people who know the most about the most random things probably. And, they've got minds like still traps. They're brilliant. But they're not necessarily going to be the first person to speak up. Like they're going to measure the room, see who's around, see who knows what. And, when they see you start to veer off, they'll course correct you, or help you, but they're not going to necessarily be in your face about all the information that they have. And so, they can come off as very aloof.
My mom has some of these tendencies because she's brilliant at managing teams, but she doesn't always like take full ownership of that. She lets other people do it and just sit in the background. She has all of these ideas and she shares them, but she'll share them like one-on-one in a lot of ways. But when it comes to being in a table, she's like, I don't need to raise my hand. People don't want to know. Like, so some of those tendencies were resonating with me when you were describing that.
Oh, and they're also I know they're the kids who like, could have been teased because they're like, oh, I know the answer to that. And here's this, and here's that. I mean, like as an 8, I have my own weird 5 tendencies. I mean, like, when I am not well, I assure you, like there is, another weird fun fact is like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan. I've always been a huge Star Wars fan, and I will nerd out, and like because it's very calming to me, like because there's it's got a whole universe. There's things like I know what all the different color lightsabers mean, but like as a kid, they might have been the one who was like, oh, I totally know the answer, blah, blah, blah. And then they heard, oh my God, why are you so weird? Why do you know that? Like, well, there's all sorts of opportunities for them to be shut down and, or not acknowledged, especially as women. I mean, that's just, it is just the truth, and it's hard. And, being even an 8 woman is hard because, there can be, being a 1 woman can be really hard because we tend to be more assertive and direct. And, as women, that's looked at very differently than it would be, if I'm a man, I'm assertive, but as a woman, I'm aggressive or I'm rude or bitchy or, and I kind of really adopted that as part of my armor, before I had done the therapy work I needed to do and the healing and the recognition of like the, vulnerability is not, I really wore that, like, I am a bitch as a badge of honor. And like one of my friends gave me a calendar one year that says like, you call me a bitch, like it's a bad thing. I'm like, I mean, because I totally embraced that because I realized there's nothing I could do about the way I was going to be viewed, and I could use it for good. And, but now I know that I can be, that I don't have to be in your face to be powerful, and that I can be assertive and kind at the same time. I don't have to do it in a way that, that pisses people off or upsets the apple cart. And that sometimes it's okay to use honey instead of, vinegar. And whereas normally I'm like, I've got a gallon bucket of vinegar and I'm going to douse you in it. So
what I think I like about this so much, for those of you watching, the sun in this window is killing me right now. I haven't recorded at this time and I keep going blind. And
yet you look angelic.
The other thing that I love about it is, I mean, you were talking about excavating earlier, and I do the same thing. You've been on the receiving end of my excavating. But one of the things that always comes up in coaching is people being able to accept themselves fully. Like, it's very hard to change something until we've accepted it in ourselves. And so this, as a tool, seems like a way for people to see more sides of themselves and accept it, not as something that has to be shunned or fixed right away, but like, hey, this is a tendency that is normal throughout humanity, and I have some of it, and how can I accept this in myself? And then, because once you get to that point, then you can look at it and say, okay, like, hey, this isn't really serving me in the best way. So now what do I want to adopt, or what do I want to shed to switch it up some? And I think that's super powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I don't know if you caught my face. I think I have come to a conclusion, by the way, throughout this conversation. So I think the 7 is truly accurate. I think a lot of the conditioning stuff that I've had to drop came from the 9, but the 7 resonates. And it's interesting because learning to sit in discomfort has been a lesson, a doozy of a lesson. And it's on Telegram. I started a Telegram community, and I wrote about sitting in discomfort 2 days ago and the strength of it, because I know, like, I've had to learn to sit in discomfort, but there are times definitely when, like, moving, it's like, wait, I'm done with this chapter. I am literally physically moving to a new city, like, tomorrow. And then you're I don't know that you saw my face, but when you were talking about 4s just like sitting in melancholy, oh my God, that sounds like my worst freaking nightmare on the planet. Like, no way in heck do I want to sit in melancholy. No way. I respect that about people who do. That is no. And then then the third thing, because I think we can find a lot of the things in the shadow side. I get this really uncomfortable feeling I have for years. I can't always predict what situation it's going to come up in. A therapist once called it social anxiety. I'm like, no, this is so much deeper than social anxiety. Like, I don't have social anxiety, and this is like it's this feeling. I just feel massively uncomfortable. And it will come up at times. And then I freak out. Like I want to crawl out of my skin.
Mm-hmm.
And those are the words I use. And I feel like was what you talked about that resonates with 7.
Absolutely. Well, and then on top of the fact that you talked about like you're more comfortable, like you're an extrovert with strangers and with your people who are close and safe, but those people who are that acquaintance category, you're like, just enough to cause me pain, like, just enough to be a pain in my ass, like, or to make something uncomfortable. And so it makes complete sense that you're like, I can have a conversation literally with someone like sitting next to me on the plane, or, somebody, or I can have those deep, dark conversations with people I know and love and trust who I, that will keep my inside uncomfortable feelings safe. But those people in between, that they're wild cards. You don't always know. And, you haven't had the time to get to know them well enough. You're not sure if you're willing to spend the time to do it because that might be uncomfortable and there might be something better to do over here. So like, we'll stick with the friends that I have and the strangers.
Yes. And my stepmom recently, she called me aloof. She said other people might perceive you as aloof. I should correct that. She didn't call me aloof. She said other people who don't know you might perceive you as aloof. And I got a little like annoyed at first because I'm like, wait, aloof. Like I thought aloof meant like, like indifferent. And so I had to look up the definition and it's, emotionally reserved. And I was like, okay, yeah, I'm with you. Cause like right before we hopped on, like I posted this Instagram story because I was like, okay, sometimes I need to cry. I feel like I need to cry. I'm moving through something. But the question is, I have 2 podcast interviews. Do I want to ruin my face? I don't want to have to redo my makeup. So I'm choosing emotional suppression or in the sake of preserving my face, or am I going to let it cry and process it? And so I have no problem sharing that stuff publicly. I walked out and told Jeff, I was like, the whole internet's going to think that I cry all the time. But for me to share that with someone in that middle ground, oh, hell no.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Yeah.
No.
And, you share that a lot with 5s. They're often always, also seen as aloof, and it's not because, and, like my dear friend that, that I'm talking about that, like, she always wants to be invited, but she's not ever going to come. I mean, like literally at one of her, she was telling me that she's been a mentor of mine. And she was telling me that like at one of her first jobs, like a woman who she's now dear friends with, first called her the Ice Queen because like, they're so observant and they're so aloof that like they, or even like those, like I have a friend who is really, I mean, I think she's a social media influencer. This is coming from the person who like hates using social media. It's because again, I might be vulnerable and that'd be scary. And so like, I'm going to get there someday. I promise. It's just little by little, but she doesn't always come off as the same person. Like if you were to just approach her and, she's had a public journey with some health issues and some things like that. And so people feel like they know her in a way that she definitely does not reciprocate because she of course has never met them before. And so they're like, they know her story, they know what she's experienced, but they're like, oh, I don't know how, like people have a funny reaction to her because she's a 5. And so her natural tendency is again to take a moment. And like when we, meet or have trips together, I mean, we both acknowledge that like, there's going to need to be some time set aside for you to recharge. And so like nothing is ever planned in the middle of the day. Like we might have lunch plans or brunch plans. We might have dinner plans, and sometimes it's literally like, I'll get a text from her hotel room over and she'll be like, you want to come over and like work on this? But like, we're going to sit in bed and do it. Like, we're going to like, we'll work on it, but it's going to be quietly and it's going to be with only the people who she can be herself with and recharge with. And so like, we just know those things get built in because those are the needs we have. And like, imagine what we could do if we brought that same level of awareness and understanding of people to like our work life and to our, I mean, like think of the level of productivity. Cause I mean, like for me, I know that like, I just have days when I'm not able to be really creative or productive. And it's ridiculous that like, I should think of myself as like, I need to be working 8 to 5. And,
Right.
I've talked about this, like, it's a hard mentality to get out of, but then recognizing that, like, when I am creative, I'm literally explosive about
Right.
it. Like, I get more done in 4 hours than most people get done in 40 hours, because like, once it comes to me, like, I can't stop. And like, I will go literally until like all of it's left. And, it's been exercised from my body. But that's just that's how I work. And and eights are also known for pushing ourselves way past a healthy point of working. And so, like, I may literally work for 48 hours straight. Not healthy, not a good thing. Got to work on that. But at the same time, like, that's the kind of creativity I experience. And other types can be that way too. And if we had that level of understanding, like, rather than saying like, okay, I need this done end of day, like, we'd think about our deadlines earlier and say like, I need this done after your next creative burst. Like, I need this done after, or like, knowing that like my most productive time is from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. Like, and that does not fit anyone's idea of a conventional work schedule. And I've had to learn all sorts of techniques about like scheduling emails and doing, because like, nobody wants an email from their boss at 2 o'clock in the morning, because they're like, then they feel bad. Like, why am I not up?
Right.
Like, why is she working at 2 o'clock in the morning? Am I not doing enough that I should be doing? Like, no, that's just when I'm most productive.
But also being able to own that, like, if you're working with a new client, like, you don't have to send it at 2 a.m. You can come work around. But if it's an intimate team, it's like saying like, hey, like, owning our experience, owning what's true for us. There's so much power in that, and people don't do it enough. And because we're trying to accommodate and fit into all these other freaking boxes, instead of recognizing that like, all of us are different. We have different models of the world. And hey, I'm the most productive from 10 to 2 in the morning. So I know it doesn't fit in traditional boxes of professionalism, but like, that's when you're going to get an email from me. You don't have to do anything with that. And then that is the piece though, where people have to be able to take you at your word for that, and like, that's where their own stuff is going to come up around, people pleasing and the shoulds and all of that. So it's just so fun being human. At least
it is. Well, and the pandemic has been an incredible study in that, in the terms that like, some of us who have worked in traditional fields, their bosses had no choice but to adjust to the fact that like, we're not going to be in the office. We're not going to be, we're going to be fitting in a load of laundry, or we're going to be taking care of our pets, or there is going to, like, I cannot tell you how many times my she's now 4, but my 3-year-old Zoom bombed me like in the middle of work. I mean, it's just going to happen, but it turns out it doesn't impact my ability to be a professional, and it doesn't impact the work that I'm able to produce. And so, I'm really interested too, in terms of humanity, to see what life starts to look like as we go back. I know that there's several offices that are they're just never going back to the office. Like, they're completely letting go of their space and recognizing that like, if we allow people to be their best selves in the way that's most productive for them, like, we get the best results, even if it doesn't look like the traditional 9 to 5 work day.
Yes.
And plus, studies tell us you only get 3 hours of work out of someone who comes in like 8 to 5 anyway. So like, why?
Yeah. I've always sort of been a contrarian about those things. And I mean, I started freelancing right out of college. So I've never had to go into a traditional office. I've gone into clients when I would work with them for multiple weeks at a time. But my definition of professionalism, and it cracks me up, because I mean, my dad is obsessed with professionalism. Like, he would have never gone into a client's office not in a suit. And I'm like, I want to be able to wear whatever I want. And I think professionalism just starts with being able to have a respectful conversation. And like, what's going to get in the way of you being able to have a respectful conversation? Like, those are the things that aren't professional to me. Most other things fall under the category of that.
Yeah.
So I have kept you past the time I told you I would keep you, because I could talk to you all day long.
Same. You can have me forever. It's fine. I don't have to pick up my kids till for another 2 hours. So you're good.
So
the world's longest YouTube post.
I love it. I love it. Well, we're not going to top Joe Rogan, because, he goes for 3 hours sometimes. No. So,
and I'm good with that, honestly.
Yeah.
He can go on all he wishes.
Yes, I agree. So, okay. So we've talked about what the Enneagram is, how you can use it, how you can use it for yourself, and how you can use it to understand more about people in the world, whether that's in your personal life, in your romantic relationships, in the workplace. So as we've been dissecting which type I am throughout this entire thing, so once someone knows, okay, I'm a 7. So I love knowing that childhood wound, because that gives me a place to say, okay, here's the piece that I need to heal, because this is leading to my behaviors in certain areas. So aside from that, though, what can we start to do with the strengths, or what's a recommendation? Once someone knows their type, what's a good way to use it? I know we talked about being able to own your needs more, but what are some other things? And then what's something that I could take away now knowing I'm a 7?
Well, the first thing I always want to tell people, because again, when we kind of figure it out, we see the shadow side of ourselves a lot easier than we see the beauty that like comes from our number. And so the first thing that I would love to tell someone, anybody who's interested in the Enneagram, is like, let that part go for a minute. Let it go. Let's just read the good part, see the beautiful things that we add. And when we're ready, then let's approach, the healing and figuring out exactly what it is that we need to do to become the best version of ourselves. And then there's so much material available. I tend to kind of stick with a couple of, areas that I know are well researched. So like, the Ready test is my favorite, but it's just a tool. Again, it can't necessarily predict exactly who you are, especially if you're not exactly sure how you respond, or we're conditioned to respond to things in a specific way. We can have some things pop up that may not necessarily be true to like our core. But there's, do some research, reach out. There's tons of online communities who are interested in learning more about the Enneagrams. Of course I'm an 8, so I love Rude Ass Enneagram on Instagram. Like, it makes me laugh every single time, and it kind of takes the sting a little bit out of like some of the really crappy parts of my personality that I know I've got to work on. But like, I feel seen without feeling like called out and shamed. And so, reach out and think about it from the humorous perspective, and then, really look and see, when you do some research, there it is like almost infinite in terms of how much you can learn. And like, I truly believe it's one of those things that like, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. And so, even though I'm a certified Enneagram coach, like I literally learn something more every day, because, there's so much, we just went over like of absolute, like, flyover view. And, we didn't get into triads. We didn't get to any of the other things like that. And there's just so much that can help you in terms of processing your emotions or recognizing them if you can't figure them out. Or like, again, I'm a great example of like, everything comes out as angry. I'm happy and it still comes out as angry. Like sometimes, and I have to be like, okay, no. And now like, I'm able to much easier express like joy or admit my own mistakes. I never wanted to do that, because that was something that would made me vulnerable to somebody using it against me. And you're like, you know what, that wasn't okay. I shouldn't have reacted that way. Or, finding ways to share, and be vulnerable so that you can connect better with other people. But, the big piece is, just dig in and find something that feels good. And, like I said, I tend to stick in the more, like, I love, the Riso Hudson, tests and their books. Father Richard Rohr, he is spiritual about it, but he has a lot of really incredible insight. A really easy starter book that lots and lots of people really enjoy is The Road Back to You by Ian Morgan Crone and Suzanne Stabile. And it's hysterical, because that was my first introduction to the Enneagram. So if you have, like, since we've already gone over, I'll just tell you my fun side story of like, it was because, actually a 4 is who introduced me to the Enneagram. So my husband's aunt who introduced it to me. And then I found a few other people in my lives. One was a 7 and a 2 who kept like, you should really research this. And of course I'm like, yeah, one more personality piece of bullshit. Sure. Whatever. And then, I'm like, finally somebody literally gifted me the book. And I'm like, well, fine. Like, I'll open it up. And then it literally like starts with 8s. And we're like, we know you think this is dumb. This is just another personality test. We know you're not going to wait for your number. Like you're going to get to 1 and be like, this is dumb and this is not relevant to me. And so we're going to start with you because we know the ones are going to follow the rules. And so they're fine with being at the end. And, 9s think they don't matter very much. So they're cool with being at the end. And so we're going to start with 8s because we know that you're going to be impatient. And then all of a sudden it was like, literally they had ripped pieces of my childhood and written about it. And I'm like, how did you know those things? And then I was angry because then they knew things about me. And then I was like, I need to know all the things. And then I was like, oh my God, I'm never going to know all the things. And then it gradually became like, okay, it's okay if I don't know all the things. I'm going to take each thing as it comes and learn and use it and integrate myself and be better. But, it's definitely something worth researching. If there's ever anything I can do, I'm always, my door is always open to talk about it. Like I said, car seats, Enneagram, Ted Lasso, I'll talk about all the time. I mean, all day, every day. So, that's definitely get started, do a little bit of research. There's so much out there and available. And if you ever have questions about, like I said, what's credible, what's not, feel free to reach out to me. Of course I'm opinionated because I'm an 8, but I really do have that 5 side where I'm like, nope, this has actually been fact checked. Like, nope, there's some base in science here. There's some research and it really does. Like I said, it's amazing the difference that it can make once you give yourself the opportunity to learn and stop being cynical about it. Not everybody's going to look at it that way, but I certainly did. And so I'm glad that I was like huffy and puffy and finally opened the book, but that's a great place to start. And like I said, there's tons of books, but, definitely recommend, a couple of those authors who are really experts. If you want to really, really dig deep, Beatrice Chestnut is another author. Ginger, I never say her name right. Lapid Bogda, I believe, is another great, like if you're having a difficult time kind of figuring out, okay, what's my type? She has some really great books of just wonderful questions to ask and say like, okay, am I this? Am I this? Like which one matters? And then, and she's also written some wonderful books about how you can really integrate that into, your workspace and help you in a professional way as well. So lots and lots out there in the world. And of course, if I can ever help, in guiding somebody, it'd be my true pleasure.
I've experienced doing that outside of this conversation too, so I can attest to it. If someone does want to connect with you, what is the best way to do so?
So honestly, my website, it's brambling.co. Totally, again, not .com. If I were smarter and it makes more, I'm like, but to me, I'm like, my company name is Brambling & Co. So I was like, Brambling.co makes perfect sense. I'm not a marketing professional. Clearly that was a silly choice, but we're here, we're sticking with it. And by God, I'm stubborn. So it's going to be Brambling.co. So you can reach out for my contact form there. I'm on most social media. I do check it and look at it and stalk it, but I'm not necessarily always posting on it, but you can always reach out. Facebook Messenger is a terrible way to reach me, just in case you want to know, because I don't ever check that. But, Instagram message at Hannah N. Fryer or at Brambling & Co. Send me an email, inquiry on the website, Hannah at brambling.co. It's easy peasy. Find me wherever, I'll be here all week. Whatever it is that you need. I'm just being weird and awkward, but yes, totally. Please feel free to reach out and, let's have a conversation and, I can point you in the right direction or, if you decide that you need something, in terms of more support or coaching or just kind of figuring it out, I'm happy to help. This really is something I'm so passionate about.
I love it. I love it. I loved this conversation. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, truly my pleasure always.
And thank you for tuning in and for watching. I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time. You've just finished listening to another episode of Make It Mentionable with me, your host, Alyssa Patmos. If you're looking for more in between episodes, then sign up for The Peel. It's my free newsletter that gives tips for how to navigate whatever life dishes. And it's also the place where I share the juiciest of stories. To check it out, head on over to alyssapatmos.com/The Peel. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.